My name is Jonathan Raskus. 12 years ago, I left my home on Tyrus 3 to study history at Ilardo University. A few months later, a biological fire ignited and started to spread. This fire came to be called Treblinka. News of the virus spread even more quickly than the virus itself. Soon, Treblinka was the only thing discussed. How dangerous was it? This we learned very quickly. 100% mortality within 7 days of the first symptoms. How far would it spread? Who was already infected? What measures would we have to take to stop it? Rigid enforcement of the strictest quarantines in history stopped all traffic, separating families, strangling the economy, placing the entire human race in the grips of turmoil and terror. You understand the circumstances surrounding the birth of the Treblinka epidemic.
A graduate geophysics student was conducting tests on soil samples collected from various systems that have been explored. One of the systems was the seeding system. Its soil contained the Treblinka spores.
Now, weren't these canisters biologically screened?
Absolutely. They were all screened according to the procedure in effect at the time.
Why didn't this screening reveal the existence of the spores?
Well, the spores are very tiny to begin with and are completely inert below plus 29 degrees centigrade. Nothing showed up.
So she opened this canister and did what?
Let's just say her tests activated the spores she didn't know existed.
What do the spores do once they're active?
If it comes into contact with living cells, it will invade that cell like a virus. A virus attacks a cell and takes over its DNA and RNA functions so that it produces more virus instead of replicating itself. Treblinka is similar, except it changes the normal cell into a Treblinka cell, releases one or two spores and able to do the same over again.
What does all this mean?
It means that Treblinka is not just a virus, but also a cancer, a terrible and deadly cancer that uses the aggressive power of a virus to spread itself. The buildup of the Treblinka cells weakens the nerve tissues. We still don't understand how that works, but eventually the nerve tissues disintegrate. It's horrible what happens to you.
What was the first thing you remember happening that had to do with the fire?
It was in the news, something about people at the university getting sick. It was being investigated.
How did people react to the story?
Well, I don't think people noticed much at first. We all went about our daily routines. It was a university thing.
When did it start to attract more attention? When did it start to get serious?
Well, when people started dying.
When university students died?
When everybody started dying, students, professors.
How many were dying?
15 or so in about 3 days. And more people were getting infected.
Were these symptoms described on the news?
Not that I recall. No, not until things got worse.
Do you remember when the first stories came out?
Around mid-August, August 15th.
When did the deaths start?
About a week or so later.
What did the news say when people started dying?
That people were dying, and that the cause of their suffering was unknown.
The word suffering was used?
Well, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe those were my words.
When did public alarm start to really increase?
When the number of people dying started to increase.
Was the word fire or epidemic being used?
No, not at first. But pretty soon everyone knew it was a fire.
Did you have any family on the base?
I lost a wife and 2 children.
Who in your family first showed symptoms?
My daughter.
What was the situation on the base at this time?
People were starting to panic. 15,000 or so were infected. Hospitals and clinics were flooded.
Who told you your daughter was sick?
No one told us she was sick. But she wouldn't eat.
She wouldn't eat?
She stopped eating. When she was 7 years old. Think about my family.
The disintegration of the nervous system produces tremendous pain. Soon the afflicted is ready to do anything just to end the agony. And that's why when parents seeing their children screaming and screaming can kill their own.
When did order begin to break down on Tyrus 3?
The first incident was the demise of base manager Donald Briggs.
What was that about?
At the close of September, about 100,000 had the disease. Many were into the painful stage. The clinics had exhausted critical medical supplies, and a lot of people were having to endure unbearable agony without medication. The whole base was screaming for the disease to be declared terminal.
So the ill could be put to death in the clinics?
Well, as you know, someone with a terminal disease can elect in their suffering.
Briggs refused to declare Treblinka terminal?
On 28 September, he announced he would postpone the decision until further research could be completed. He was one of those ultra-conservative types, not about to let people choose that sort of thing. There's still a few of them around in positions of influence.
He died that same day?
A mob tore him to shreds.
Were you aware this was happening?
I got a call from security saying that a violent crowd was forming outside of base headquarters. In the next hour, I got 2 more calls. The first saying that a mob was vandalizing the area around the center itself and growing more violent. And the second saying that they were storming the center itself.
What'd you do?
QT-1 prevented descending onto the base, so naturally I dispatched a message to my superiors.
Treblinka was then declared terminal?
Early on the 29th.
What effect did this have?
People formed lines outside the clinics.
They queued up to be put to death?
You have to realize the pain these people were in.
Did you ever go to the clinics?
Just once. I took my daughter. She was in horrible pain.
What happened? Please, what did you see?
It was a madhouse. Huge lines of people screaming for medication. The man with the speaker said for everyone to hold out their bare right arm. They had huge injection guns with long hoses.
You never entered the clinic?
My poor little girl held out her tiny right arm.
What happened when the medication ran out?
You don't want to know.
Please, I know the base ran out of medication just before the end of September. What happened?
I had no idea how lucky my daughter was compared to the others.
What happened in early October?
People started killing themselves.
The clinics began operating early October?
That's affirmative. But what a fiasco. They abandoned established SOP almost immediately. Patient counseling and all that nonsense was a joke. It quickly became an assembly line.
How was it done?
The procedure called for lethal injection, and the clinics did this at first, but soon ran out of serum. They substituted other lethal chemicals as best they could, but those were expended as well. The reality was, a lot of people started killing themselves in various ways.
Why were the bodies disintegrated?
As a precaution to help stop the spread of the disease. How the disease spread was not known at the time.
What would happen to a body which died due to Treblinka if it were left lying around indefinitely?
Nothing.
Why do you think there was such a rush to disintegrate the bodies?
I told you they were considered a source of infection.
Well, wouldn't it have been much, much easier just to dump the bodies outside of the base without bothering to liquefy them?
I don't know why they choose disintegration.
You can think of no reason for disintegrating the bodies as opposed to just dumping them outside the base.
That's right.
When did disintegration become the established procedure?
Mid-October. By the 20th, there were 14 refuge disintegrators brought online and adjusted to process people.
Adjusted?
Garbage in general is quite dry. I'm not sure of the numbers, but as you know, people are comprised mostly of water. It makes a big difference. We had to install a large drain for the output.
What was the capacity of the disintegrators?
The standard D12 could do 14 or 15 K in a 24-hour shift. The blender could do 3 times that.
So you're saying that in mid-October, thousands of people were voluntarily lining up to be exterminated?
Negative. Not at all. It's more complicated than that. I just said a lot of those that were disintegrated were already dead.
Some disintegrators just handled corpses?
That's right.
How are the bodies collected?
I'm not fully aware of the procedures involved.
I know that private quarters were invaded.
So you would prefer that dead bodies be left to rot?
Suppose somebody were dying, but not yet dead.
What do you mean?
Suppose upon entry, security found somebody who was dying, but not yet dead. What did they do?
To my knowledge, they did nothing.
They didn't encourage the sick to go to disintegrators.
Those people that went to the disintegrators did so of their own free will.
You know nothing of the riots to have all of the sick immediately processed and pumped outside the base.
By middle October, when those disintegrators came online, the base was total chaos. Everyone knew they were dying. They were running around like lunatics.
So you're saying that in mid-October, when 1 million out of the population of 64 million were sick, everyone was running around like lunatics?
Affirmative. They knew what was coming.
You know nothing of sick people being forced into disintegrators.
There were always stories, but to my knowledge, never any evidence.
Do you think it happened?
I don't know. I just don't know.
You have no knowledge of sick people being lured to clinics with the promise of medication only to find themselves herded to tanks.
Absolutely not. I know what you're trying to do here, young man, and it's bullshit.
What I'm trying
Every
to do
time a
here
tragedy
is learn what
occurs,
really
these
happened.
conspiracy theory
Why were
cases come out of
communications
the
severed
woodwork,
and news
look at the
coverage
secret
halted?
plots and government
Why have
schemes.
all military
They work themselves into a
communiques been
frenzy over the
classified?
slightest coincidence. They get all the people upset over nothing but the figments of their sick imaginations.
Turn the camera off. Turn it off!
In early October, people became obsessed with pressure suits, air compressors with filters, freeze-dried food, bottled water. Most people holed up in their quarters. But then people started. People started. I can't, I'm sorry, I just can't. They zeroed in on families, households. If someone in your house caught fire, then they considered the whole house infected. And then they came for you.
Who came for you?
They came for you.
Who's that?
How the hell should I know?
When you implemented Operation Dignity, did you know this was happening at all the bases?
Only later.
So when the pulses were sent, the population was down to about 40 million, roughly half of them showing symptoms.
That's affirmative. They were put out of their agony.
20 million showed no symptoms at all.
It's goddamn easy for you to sit here, Mr. Historian, with 12 years of hindsight and criticize the actions of those involved in the heat of the moment.
3 months is a rather long moment.
Millions would have had to endure unspeakable agony if those pulses hadn't been sent.
Do you agree with the published figure of 642 million killed in the fire?
I have no reason to dispute that figure.
Does it surprise you?
Actually, I'm surprised it's so small. Hidden ignition fire can spread for months or even years without our knowledge. You know, until the symptoms start, we don't even feel the noose tightening around our neck.
How did this disease get the name Treblinka?
I don't know. People start referring to it by that name even before it became widespread.
You have no other associations with the name Treblinka?
No, I don't.
How did the disease get the name Treblinka? When did you first hear it called by that name?
I don't know. Mid-September, maybe.
Before it was declared terminal.
Yes, I'm sure of that because of the headlines.
Have you ever heard that name before?
No.
So you've never heard any story about how the fire got its name?
It was just called that.
Do you have any other associations with the name Treblinka?
Not that I can recall.
Have you studied military history?
Certainly, of course.
World War II?
It's a ways back, though, sure.
You studied World War II and know nothing of the name Treblinka.
Skip the grilling and tell me what I'm supposed to know.
Treblinka was a death camp in Poland. It was the first place where an assembly line procedure was used to exterminate people.
I don't understand a point you're trying to make.
A biological fire gets named after the first place where people were systematically led to a gas chamber. 1 month later, because of this fire, people were systematically led to tanks. You don't consider that one hell of a coincidence?
Shit happens. What the fuck is this? What do you think you're accomplishing with this Inquisition? Well, I'll tell you, nothing. You lost your family, you and how many others. Your parents died as a result of a bug that doesn't even think, and you've got to face it. Everyone affected has got to face it. Deal with it, file it away as a lesson learned, and get on with life. This cover-up and conspiracy nonsense of yours is just an effort to find somebody to hate and blame.
Turn it off.
Yes, people lined up to be disintegrated, and yes, homes were invaded, and I'll let you in on something. They were going to die anyway. You know, do you understand? Instead of dying on Saturday, they died on Tuesday. What the fuck difference does it make? Yes, terrible things happen. You ask if atrocities were committed as a descended into the depths of hell itself? Well, probably. What would you expect in hell? Did you really believe that everyone would go out holding hands and singing folk songs?
Let's return to those canisters of soil you mentioned. How many canisters are there?
In all the labs, 500,000 perhaps.
500,000? And any of them could contain the source of another fire?
It would be of little concern. Every canister will be scanned with U pulses before opening. I'm not concerned with another Treblinka.
Why not?
I believe we rise a level with each problem. We met Treblinka and survived. We now understand how to disrupt biological processes with U pulses.
What do you mean, rise a level?
I mean, it's like school. After algebra, you take calculus. The problems are not just harder, but different, involving higher concepts. The next problem will not be another Treblinka. It will be what comes after Treblinka.
What comes after Treblinka?
Something completely different, something we have never encountered, never seen, and could never suspect.
Why do you think this will happen?
Why wouldn't it?
There's something you need to understand. Every infected person is a weapon like this, pointed at your head.
Fine, just put it down.
Put it down? This is an infected person. Put him down. Put her down.
It's horrible what happens to you. Something completely different, something we have never encountered, never seen, and could never suspect.